here we go. So here we are. Hello, Josie. How are
Hey,
you? Happy
how are you
Memorial
doing?
Day.
Yes, happy Memorial Day.
Hmm. You have any family that were in the military?
Not for a few generations, no. I had
No,
a
really. I never
grandfather.
heard you talk about you having family in the military. That's interesting. I mean, it's almost kind of rare to run into as somebody who doesn't have any like close relatives that were in the military. That's kind of rare to
Yeah.
run into that.
I think my stepson is going to join the military. He's a senior in high school,
Ian,
so yep, Ian.
I
Yep, you've
remember
met
him.
him a few times. Yeah, good kid.
Man, I don't know. Like this may, I did one of my little online rants on the Vladimir Putin page, and I said, given that that we're in the midst of a decline of the empire, and given that empires tend to do stupid shit with their military as they're on their
Militarily,
way out, yeah, as they crumble to pieces, they
especially
tend
if
to,
that's how we seem to be holding on to our hegemony with military and
yeah,
security
yeah.
force.
It's like what ends up happening is they always end up overextending themselves and ending up getting their asses kicked militarily. And we haven't even gotten our asses kicked militarily yet, but it's coming. So
Yeah.
I thought to myself some time ago, I said, I wouldn't recommend for kids to, let me move this a little bit. I wouldn't recommend, kids to join the military at this time because
Right.
chances
Especially
are
with
they can end. What's that?
politicians without regard for sending your kids overseas,
Yeah.
and the overzealousness and the manufacturing consent, how quickly the mobs can get worked up to send your kids overseas also, and just that atmosphere of one panic after another. So you never know, it
Yeah.
could be on the horizon rather quickly,
Yeah, they
in
tend
some
to.
forward entanglement.
Yeah, that's what tends to happen in every single case of a declining empire. Usually marks the official end is when they have that crushing military defeat. And it's
Yeah.
coming for the United States, one way or the other. I really feel people always talk about how much the U.S. military spends, how much the government spends on its military in borrowed money, of course, but how much money it spends. That's not indicative of a strong military, how
No,
much money goes into it.
we could talk
And
about government waste. Oh my God.
yeah,
Just
like,
throwing exorbitant amounts of money at a project that's not just
it's a money
operating
launder. It's
inefficiently. Yeah, money laundering. That's what I was
it's a
going to say.
money laundering scheme. And if you look at, I read somewhere that 40 to 50% of the defense budget, something like 40%, I want to say it said something like 40% goes to contractors, all sorts of contractors. And you can go on, I think I saved it somewhere. You can actually go on. Let me make sure you're still there. You
Yeah.
can actually go
Depart-
on.
Department of Defense budget.
I thought I saved it. Maybe I didn't. Somewhere, U.S. government contract. Yeah, you could
Pentagon.org.
go right here. I saved this. This is funny. This is the kind of shit I look for sometimes on the internet. I'm gonna share it with. I'm gonna do the screen share. Let's. Hopefully this doesn't kill the. If we're just recording, we're not live, so it's not a big deal if we have to pause it for a
Oh,
minute.
by the way, my Aunt Sherry and my Uncle Gary are veterans. I got to give them a shout out.
Mm.
The Higgins side,
Yeah.
my favorite auntie. She's awesome. So,
So
yeah.
you can
Thank
go
you
on
for your
this. Are
service.
you able to see the screen yet?
I see myself doubled on the screen and inverted and backwards. So.
Really?
Well, not inverted and backwards, because that would almost be like
But do you
right side
see
up out of
something
a
that says
basketball.
contracts?
No. Oh, remember, I don't see the screen sharing, but
Oh,
you
you
can point it
can't
out to
see.
me and I can comment on what your
Oh,
take is.
okay.
You can
Well
describe
then,
it.
well, I just wanted to show you. I thought you can't see screen sharing. Last time you could see screen sharing. Oh well. Okay, I thought you could. Anyway, you could pull up. You can go to the U.S. Department of Defense. Just it's called defense.gov/news /contracts, and you can look up
Oh, that's so
every.
nice.
Yeah, you can look up every defense contract. Okay, that for every day. So right now I pulled up
Budget
something.
breakdowns and stuff.
Well, it's like all it is you go. So to describe it to you, you go to the. I got the link saved, and people will be able to see it, and then it just says contracts, and it has every day contracts for May 27th, 2022. Contracts for
With
May
350
26th, 2022. So then you click on that link, and it says contracts for May 27th, 2022 in the header, and it says. So I might as well stop screen sharing because it'll probably kill it since you can't see it. For example, here we go. Raytheon Corporation, Tucson, Arizona, was awarded $624 million, 601,000. It was a modification to a contract for the procurement of Stinger missiles. So the United States government just ordered Stinger missiles from Raytheon for $600 million.
Yeah, that's what they campaigned for. That's what they were donating for, to get cabinet positions.
Mm-hmm. And then there's all of
Yeah.
these little things you never heard of. Pacific Dredge Construction. So a construction company in San Diego, California, was awarded $9 million. They're probably doing something to one of the bases down there. It's a dredge and construction, so maybe they're dredging the naval base. But I bet you, if this was outside of the government contract process, if it was actually awarded as a, like a normal business would say, okay, we want to subcontract something out. So we're going to find
Right.
the cheapest
Bidding,
for
yes,
the best.
right,
Yeah.
there'll be a
So I
process.
bet you like a private organization would be able to get that job done for half or even more than half the cost of
That's where the
$9
no
million.
bid contracts come into play.
Yeah. So it's just where
Shoot, I was almost thinking on the website there was a degree of transparency there for a minute.
here goes
Kinda
one
being
254 million for electronic warfare
Visual suspect.
improvement.
Probably Boeing and Lockheed
You
Martin
got
around there.
you can see them on this one. You see Northrop Grumman, and here we have someone I never heard of, AV3 Inc. awarded $21 million for what? Brand name for teleconferencing equipment so that the officers can have their teleconferences. $21 million for teleconferencing equipment. Okay, so that's the kind of shit you see. So it's a big money laundering scheme. So
I'm sure
then you
there's
go,
media consultants, PR consultants also, and like think tanks.
yeah, the think
lot
tanks,
of-
that's a money laundering scheme right there. And they're just handing money to their friends. But so we spend $700
Yeah,
million.
Brookings Institute. There's a
Billion.
few involved in Ukraine right now. I can think
Yep.
of.
And so just because we spend so much money doesn't mean our military is indestructible. I would argue that perhaps that puts us in a weaker position because we think we have so much hubris behind us. And for example, Russia countered everything we've thrown at them so far in Ukraine, which really wasn't much. But the Stinger missiles, all they had to do was fly low. The javelins don't even work. When they send, the javelins they're sending over there are all have dead batteries when they get there because they've been sitting in a warehouse for so long. So this whole thing about, we spend so much money, our military's indestructible. People obviously don't understand history because history is full of instances when technologically and quantitatively superior militaries were defeated by supposedly lesser militaries.
By their own bureaucracy, though, inside. By not developing the technologies because of their own bureaucracies, giving false security, right? Because the chain of command, I'm sure if they're convincing somebody, this is, put money into this project and it's state-of-the-art.
Or they could say there could be a new technology and the bureaucracy.
Like hypersonic missiles for, example, something Russia is, has in spades that we didn't really take the time to develop because maybe the military-industrial complex didn't see incentive to, make enough money off of it to exploit this.
Exactly. No, you bring up a good point. How is it that Russia, that spends $60 billion and we spend $800 billion roundabouts, how is it that they're so ahead of us in anything? How is
Right.
that?
I mean, we are a naval power, and they're engaged in ground warfare in their own backyard, so they're at an
Well,
advantage that we don't see. But it's our arrogance why we feel like, we could just push them around and have our way, and
well,
and that's the case. We can't really get these missiles into the hands of the Ukrainians, and the ones that are,
oh,
like Ukrainians were making jokes about U.S. technology and our
the
missile defense
javelin.
systems that we're giving them. Yeah, the javelins, or
Yeah,
like the F-35s, where I think half of them, it's not quite half, but how many at one time are operable because, like
right.
you said, they're waiting on, components, and half of them are
They're too
grounded and
complicated.
things.
They're too complicated, and they're a bitch to maintain because they're so complicated. And that's what the United States does. That's another problem with the United States military. Is we design and we field these weapons that are overly complex. And the reason that we do that is because the military contractors make more money the more complex weapons they make. So they milk it for everything they can get, and the U.S. government pours all this money into these programs for weapons and planes and all sorts of shit that doesn't really work, and they do it on
So they can,
purpose. Go ahead.
so they can control the markets. Just the same thing with NATO. How they have a captive audience, how they can make people, make these nation states buy U.S. weapons, as a condition
Yeah.
to be able to join NATO, which is essentially a market for U.S. defense contractors. I
Well,
mean, it's the same thing. Like, I had to buy a fuse the other day for my truck, and since it's like, a new vehicle that supposedly specialized, I couldn't get a regular 40A fuse. It had to be special. I ended up modifying it so it would fit on its own. But the same kind of thing. Like, I run into a hassle, and it's like, no, you have to go to the dealership. You have to buy exactly through RAM,
yeah,
because we're going to make it so specialized and so, unique that you need to come to
yeah.
us every time you need something.
And speaking of the Navy, you brought that up. Now, I've seen buzz and rumors and all this, and a lot of analysis around the internet that the Chinese are developing missile systems that will basically neutralize aircraft carriers. They're developing these surface to surface missiles, naval missiles that are supposed to be launched from these specialized destroyers, and they've fielded already hundreds of these destroyers. And these missiles, supposedly, I think they may be, I don't think they're hypersonic, but they're close to it. And the U.S. doesn't have a countermeasure for them, and they're designed to go after aircraft carriers. They're literally designed for that. And a lot of people are arguing that aircraft carriers are not really are in the next major war. Aircraft carriers probably will be proven obsolete, and people. It's hard for people to think about that. But when you look at World War II, for example, nobody could have conceived in the beginning of World War II. Very few people that the
The
battleship
British were going to get wiped
were
out.
going to. Well, people
Otherwise,
couldn't have
World War I.
conceived that the battleship would be useless and that the aircraft carriers would take over.
Oh, when the
Nobody.
U-boats came out.
U-boats were a little earlier. That was, that was World War One. Actually, the Germans used them a lot. But yeah, also nobody could have conceived that the Germans would have used the U-boats so effectively in World War II. They thought, oh, this is not possible, and then the Germans almost starved out the British, the UK by cutting off all of the shipping. So. But so that's another thing. Is like, okay, so our Navy is great, but how is our Navy going to fare against these new weapons the Chinese are making? And here's the thing: is the United States, also another thing I wanted to bring up. I forgot to bring up this a minute ago. Is these contractors, whichever contractor it is that develops these weapons, oftentimes when they let out the first series, like they produce the first series of these weapons, they intentionally leave bugs in those weapons and those vehicles so that now the United States has to turn around and award another contract so they can improve them. And they literally do that on purpose. They've been accused of doing that for years. So basically,
Sounds like something out of our playbook as well.
that's it. That's our contractors. That's our military contractors. And so our whole military industrial complex is not about being effective at fighting wars at all. It's about
It's being
extracting as
constant.
much money. It's about as extracting as much money in the process of developing weapons and producing weapons as possible. If you look at the Russian doctrine, their doctrine is all about utility, pragmatism, robustness, ease of maintenance. The ability to, like, their jets, our jets are very complicated. You have to have a very nice runway. The Russian jets, the newest Russian jets, they're designed to take off from a dirt runway.
Yeah.
Their most modern jets can take off from a dirt runway. Ours couldn't do that. So that's the difference you see.
Because they're not geared towards outsourcing them for sales,
Right,
and
right, that too.
maintenance and
It's
forever like
all about the
marketability.
business aspect of it, and it's not about the actual effectiveness of those weapons. So this whole thing about the United States military being unbeatable, I'm skeptical. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I think that a lot of the next major war we get into,
I
people
know
are
I
going to
don't
be
want to think that
surprised.
way. We haven't gone up against a major first world power
Mm-mm.
like a nation that we can't just airstrike and then send our military in on the ground to mop things up.
Yeah,
It's going to be a
exactly.
little more complex, like ground warfare, trench
Well,
warfare,
and
and
after
I don't know if the military is equipped for that. We've had all these low intensity conflict training exercises,
yeah,
military excursions to keep the troops, in a state of readiness. But I don't think, I mean, I'm not one to speak. I don't want to be disrespecting any troops on Memorial
it's
Day,
not
but
disrespecting the
it just
troops. The
seems
fact,
like the arrogance that we're not from troops, but from Americans in general, that we just feel we have this superiority, like we can, we have the responsibility because we can police the world and we can maintain order, like these illusions that are
right.
starting to break down. I think people are going to
Well,
realize, and I hope it doesn't take a military defeat, but a big economic defeat, we're not going to acknowledge, because we can still prop up, our empire sickness,
yeah,
with the destabilization to try to maintain on top, losing our economic status. We're going to still try to prop this up and back it up with military. So I don't
yeah.
know how we're going to learn
That's
our
what I
lesson otherwise.
exactly. That's what's going to happen as our economy continues to flounder. Then you're going to see the rabid beast, start thrashing around, and that's why I just I never used to discourage kids from joining the military at all. I used to encourage it, but I don't know about encouraging it right now because I could see a major military debacle happening, and it probably won't be wipe out the whole army and your nephew or your was his stepson or nephew stepson would be probably safe. The chances of him dying. But what will happen eventually is we're going to send troops somewhere, maybe a few thousand troops, and they're going to get massacred. It's going to happen. And then people are going to finally wake up and be like, holy shit. Or we're going to lose aircraft carriers, or we're going to lose
I
planes. We're
really
going to
hope
do
that's not what
something.
it takes. I
Oh,
mean,
it
if we could
has
just
to.
rein in the powers,
You
these
can't.
agencies, if they can't be reined in, and I mean, they
They
need some
can't.
type of
You can't rein them
embarrassing
in.
defeat,
How can you
because
rein
we're
them
going to
in?
be the bad actors on the stage, on the world stage,
We already are.
if not.
We already are the bad actors. No one likes the United States. Europe
Yeah,
just
it's
kisses up to
kind
us because we protect them. Supposedly, they think we protect them. The rest of the world didn't join the sanctions. I showed you the map before. Nobody,
of,
and now you have Argentina wants to join BRICS. Did you hear about that?
no, no,
Yeah,
I'm not surprised. I think
Argentina.
you mentioned that. I saw that. I'm
Yeah,
aware.
I just heard about it recently. Argentina wants to join BRICS. The rest of the world doesn't trust the United States, and they have or Europe. Europe is also in the same predicament with Africa. Africa doesn't trust Europe, or the Middle East doesn't trust Europe. Asia doesn't trust Europe. So, you know, we already are the bad actors, but it's got to end that way because that's what always that how are you going to stop this massive bureaucratic machine, okay, that is just intent on maintaining its hegemony over the United States and the world? How are you going to stop that? They literally control the government. Not even the president is going to get in their way. These people, these bureaucrats, these military leaders, NATO, and the world leaders, World Economic Forum, all of these people, you're not going to stop them. They have to. It has to be a disaster. That's the only way anything ever
Right.
gets
They
changes.
can be
Is you have
reined
to have
in.
a disaster because people are
That
like
could
a
be a
hurt.
good segue. Also, we could have a
Go
good
ahead.
segue into this. I mean, this day and age, like we're seeing, like the J. Edgar Hoover style FBI and these agencies that seem like they're not accountable to anybody. They're running domestic operations. They're using the media. They're planting stories. They're leaking information. Like what we see with the Sussman trial that's
Mm-hmm.
happening. I mean, it's kind of validating a lot of what we already know
Mm-hmm.
about the Clintons having their lawyer represent them to, take
Well,
on a political
he
candidate,
was one
saying
of
that
many. He was one of many lawyers in Perkins Co., which is the law firm. Sussman worked for Perkins Co., and Perkins Co.
right,
had several lawyers, not just Sussman, working for Hillary Clinton. Sussman's just the one that got caught
just a
lying
fall
to
guy,
the FBI. Yeah, he's the
yeah,
guy that got. He's I wouldn't
right,
say
because they could
he's a
trace him
powerful lawyer. He's a powerful lawyer
campaign.
in D.C. I mean, if you can call I didn't
Mhm.
mean to interrupt you, but just quickly,
No, no, no.
if you're a lawyer and you can call the general counsel of the FBI and get a meeting the next day off the record, then you're somebody in D.C.
Right? When was that? Was that during the DNC hack? I mean, or was
September.
this 2016
Well,
with the Alpha Bank story?
that's what the trial is about. The trial is about that Sussman
Meeting
texted
with Baker.
James Baker, who now is the counsel for Twitter, by the way.
I know. Yes, I know. I made a video about that.
Now this
All
general
these
counsel for
connections.
Twitter, so you can see at where who Twitter is really in cahoots with there. So Sussman texts James Baker on his personal phone. So they were already friends, by the way. They already knew each other very well. And he said, "Hey, I want to show you something." And I'm not. He said it in the text. This is the evidence. This is the smoking gun. I'm not coming on behalf of a client. So he said, "I'm doing this for my country because I'm afraid that Trump is working with Russia." So then he goes to the meeting. For some reason, Baker doesn't take notes of the meeting, which they always take notes. FBI people always take notes. And he doesn't ask anybody else to attend the meeting. Usually, in a situation like that, you would ask another
You would want it
FBI
on
lawyer to
record.
come and sit in the meeting with you. He didn't do that. So then it turns out, James Baker says that in the meeting, Sussman told him again that he wasn't there on
Wasn't
behalf
meeting
of a
on behalf
client.
of a client. That's what he
However,
said.
James Baker must have known that Sussman was
Oh,
working
absolutely.
for the
They
Clinton
just needed him
campaign.
to say that. They needed the plausible deniability because if he
Yeah.
had said he was working for a
And
client,
then
there wouldn't be anything there.
how they prove that he
Had a
was so
willingness
what's that?
to want to believe. The FBI had a willingness to want to corroborate this and need to be able to say that it
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
on behalf of a client in order to launch an investigation
Yes, so
into
Baker.
somebody that they saw as a threat.
Yep. So Baker was in on it, essentially. I mean, we can't prove that though. That's the plausible deniability you're talking about. So then, how they prove in the case that Sussman was in fact working for his client when he had that meeting with James Baker? Because they could say, oh, well, Sussman, yeah, he was working for Hillary Clinton at the time, but he wasn't working for Hillary Clinton in this particular instant, right?
Yeah,
But
it's stuff with semantics. Yeah.
except the
Right.
problem is the flash drive that Sussman gave. So Sussman went to Staples, bought a flash drive, okay, and he billed it to Hillary Clinton. He billed it. He billed the $12. He billed Hillary Clinton $12 for a flash drive, and that was the flash drive that he used to put the information on that he gave to James Baker
I mean, what
to
the
forward
fuck was
up.
that like? Was that like a blackmail file or to security? Was that to keep him just in case, like maybe he had evidence on Hillary in case they tried
No,
to 86 him or
no
disappear him?
the
That
flash
wasn't in
drive.
contact.
The flash drive was to hold the documents that he intended to give to Baker that proved that supposedly proved Donald Trump had a secret
Oh
communication
no, I
channel.
get it, but I'm just saying that. I mean, what a coincidence! Like, I'm thinking like that could be some type of security against, if they make him the fall guy. I don't know if he thought that far into it, but
Who
I mean, what
knows?
a
What?
mistake is that. He might have kept that receipt saying later on if they throw him under the bus,
Yeah,
I can, have this
that's a good
leverage on
theory.
me.
It's a good theory. I mean, what
It's kind of very
Robert Barnes seems
suspicious.
to think it was just that agreed because lawyers want to bill everything, and
Oh,
so,
okay. Oh
but
my
it,
God.
yeah,
They're
because
12
lawyers will bill everything. They'll bill a pen that they buy. Like they're all about billing clients because they're greedy, and they're also really arrogant. So they're like, well,
Yeah,
I'm not too worried about getting caught. But that is the smoking gun, the
the
text
hubris is
message.
always their downfall.
So they got the text message that to arrange the meeting where he said I wasn't working for a client. Then James Baker, who testified in the trial, said, yeah, he told me he wasn't working for a client. Uh, and then the billing of the flash drive to give to James Baker with all the information proves that he was in fact working for Hillary Clinton, that item was used in that particular meeting to exchange the information, and he billed that to Hillary Clinton. So it's an open and shut case. It's like if it was a normal, jury that wasn't from DC, it would be a
Right? That's
guilty
insane.
verdict,
DC's
easy
very
guilty
small.
verdict. But I think it's going to be a hung jury, is what I think. I think it's going to be hung,
No,
or even not guilty,
I hope not.
because there's a lot of
Like, we can't even get a fall guy on this. Like,
no,
Kleinsmith ended up having his license reinstated to practice
yeah,
law,
it's because
and
Durham took it
he
easy on
made a
him.
deal.
Durham took it easy on him.
Well, Durham, from what I hear, Durham is going to take it easy on the FBI also. He doesn't want any embarrassment. That's why he's going slow, and he's not releasing too much at any
I
inconvenient
don't think
time.
he's gonna prosecute any more cases after this. I don't
Yeah,
think
I
so,
know a
because
lot of people that had faith. They're like, yeah, the Durham report, the IG
mm-hmm.
report's coming out. Wait till this happens. Then everybody will see. Will be vindicated.
The IG report, the Horowitz report, was not bad. It was no nonsense. It just said the facts. And of course, he said, well, I can't prove that they did all this lying maliciously. He said, I
Right?
can't. But
But
of
it's not their
course,
job to disprove an accusation, though.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah. So the IG report, the Horowitz report, was actually probably the highlight of the whole, investigation into RussiaGate. And the Durham, this trial is going to be the anticlimax, and then it's going to be done. I think that especially if it's a hung jury, I don't, and then they're just going to say, oh well, that's our excuse not to prosecute anymore. We can't prosecute in D.C. So that'll be the end of that, and that's what probably Durham wouldn't have a pro. It'll be embarrassing for Durham, and these lawyers all have egos. So if he loses this case, he'll probably be
I just
pissed.
wish more people got pissed off. I wish more people were mad and would say, to hell with this. It's all a racket. There's
Well, a
no
lot of people are.
jurisdiction here for these, DC swamp, these courts. They're biased. They
Yeah,
don't have any legitimacy. Let's get rid of them.
a lot of people are saying that. A lot of people are saying it's time to get rid of DC. I mean, DC is a point like that. If you look at the jury pool, because I watched the whole jury selection process on the guy Guvella read out the transcripts, and you have everybody there. There's like 6 out of the 10 jurors. I think it's 12 or 10, maybe just 10 jurors. I forget. 6 out of the 10 were hardcore political, either donated to the DNC or Hillary Clinton.
Oh, no kidding.
Some of them worked for the phone banks. There was not one person on there who said they were a Republican or a Trump supporter. And then you had one guy who was a mechanic, and then you have one guy who is like a kid who said, I like to play video games. And then you have one, like, that's who you have. So you're going to
Right.
have, like,
One impressionable. It's going to get pushed around by the others.
and you're gonna, yeah, the ones, because there was one who was, and then there was one juror who personally knew Sussman through a
Yeah.
kid,
Oh,
through the kids, not like friends or anything, but her kid went to the same soccer team as like his kid or
Right.
something like that. So it's just
You
ridiculous.
can only have so many coincidences until you start seeing
Well,
clusters of deception. But
if you look
wouldn't
at
it be funny?
DC,
I was thinking of something. Wait, this would be funny because what if
mhm,
like you were on the jury pool and they looked you up and like, oh, this guy donated to the human rights campaign for so many years.
mhm,
You know, that'd be
mhm.
pretty funny, right?
Yeah,
And
then
like the certain causes you got behind back in the day.
I wonder if they could
And
even
like he's
look
a
up.
liberal. He's a fucking liberal. Oh my god.
Well, I mean, everything. I don't think they can really look like start investigating into your life. All they can do is give you a questionnaire and say that if you lie on the questionnaire, that's technically perjury. But people lie on the questionnaires all the time if they
Oh
lie the
yeah,
right
the
way.
activists in those
Yeah,
positions, right?
as long as
They
they
bragged
lie the
about it
right
with the
way.
Rittenhouse case. There was a couple
Yep.
people that were in there. They ended up being removed from the jury, if I remember
Every major
correctly, because
case you have one like that. It seems like all of these high profile cases, you get a juror on there who is like Roger Stone case, remember, had one. And she was a big time activist in DC. And then
yeah,
Rittenhouse, and then the Chauvin, which I mean, I think the verdict, honestly, I think the verdict for Chauvin was a good verdict, honestly. But uh, he at least manslaughter the guy should have got. As far as like
yeah.
murder, I don't know. Felony murder is not really a good law in the first place, but he should have got at least voluntary manslaughter. So I'm not. But there was an activist on that case who was, I think, a BLM guy. That's the one guy that got a picture surfaced of him in D.C. at a BLM rally, and here he is, and he lied about it. He said he had no connection to that, right? And he's literally an activist. So it's like every high profile case, they manage somehow through the random process, the random computer generated
Vetting
process,
process.
to get a juror on there that is very very activistic. So I don't buy it. I don't buy that process is completely random, because if you can just, they say, oh, it's all generated on the computer, they just randomly choose jurors. Sure, anybody can go in and fiddle with the program and get somebody to fiddle with the program and pull a juror they want to pull. Anybody can do that. Anybody with computer expertise could do that. But yeah, so the Sussman trials, I think it's going to be. I mean, the only thing that besides the Robbie Mook testimony came out, and that was the only big
I'm not that
bombshell.
familiar.
That was the one where Robbie Mook was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. I believe one of the high ups, like maybe one of her senior campaign managers, and he testified on under, I think, under the direct examination, which means Durham's team, the prosecution, were asking him questions, and he said, "Yeah, Hillary Clinton personally approved of the Alpha Bank, of pushing the Alpha Bank stuff and of getting Sussman. I don't know what all she approved of, but she approved of the whole RussiaGate lie thing. So it wasn't just people doing it on her behalf, and she had no idea. She was personally involved in everything that Sussman was doing. Like, should
Right.
we do this? Should we do that? She would say, yeah, do this, do that.
So
So
her
that was the big
manager admitted
bombshell.
under oath that
Yeah,
the big lady, she had prior knowledge of this,
yeah,
and she
the
authorized
big
the
gal.
green lady.
The big
The
gal,
big
yeah.
gal.
So people
Yeah,
are saying,
is anybody saying that? Like the big 10% for the big guy? Like she's the big gal?
I don't know, but I've seen plenty of memes about Robbie Mook, witness protection, rest in peace, Robbie Mook, all
Oh
that
no.
stuff.
Yeah.
Hillary
Oregon
Clinton
Conclusion.
Hillary Clinton, memes of her trying to assassinate Robbie Mook and all that shit. So, I mean, he wasn't going to be the fall guy. He's like, fuck that. Okay, I'm not going to be the fall guy. So at least someone in this world has some balls. But yeah, so that was the only big bombshell that came out of the trial. Other than that, it's all really stuff we already know. You just get to see how incompetent and corrupt the FBI is. First of all of the low-level people they call in that examine the evidence, all of these low-level FBI agents, data analysts, and they're all testifying, look, this was garbage from the start, and we said it was garbage from the start. And so if it was garbage from the start, then how did it make it so far? Well, obviously, you can put one, two, and two together, and the upper management pushed it, even though the all of the field investigators said this is garbage. So they were all they seemed kind of annoyed by it. Oh, doggy's going
Oh,
crazy. I
yeah,
could
I'm gonna
pause
let
it.
my
I could
husky
pause
out.
it. I could
How's it right
pause it.
here?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So, okay, we're running again. So, anyway, you see a lot of that sort of stuff where the lower level guys are all testifying, like, yeah, this was all garbage. Somehow the case persisted. Then you have a few interesting things like the new star, these companies, these contractors. You get a kind of a window into these cybersecurity contractors that are working in
Oh, like
DC.
CrowdStrike. I was gonna say what
Yeah.
type of what type
Yeah,
of
no, like
contractor?
CrowdStrike, but this one was a different company. That's the guy Jaffe. So Rodney Jaffe owned this company, and it's just so corrupt. It's just like they make multiple companies so that they can evade all these laws, so they can do different things. And the company basically told the data analysts, you need to, they basically forced them to sort of find something out of nothing in the data and make a report that wasn't true so that they can send it and make it sound like Trump had a secret server connected to Russia. And it was
Oh
all
yeah,
and the
okay.
way they kind of
That was
intimidated them
right.
into doing it. You get a window into how they kind of pushed them into doing it. It's all this corrupt shit. It's just a window into that, but nothing very new other than that. And it will be
So
a
the
hung
low-level
jury.
FBI agents, were they were what are you saying? They didn't want to testify, of course, but
No, there some did.
they thought it
Some
was
did.
bullshit.
Some came in and they
They didn't
said,
want to go
yeah,
near it.
they no, they were ordered to look at the data, that or look at the evidence, and there's a couple different things that they talk about in the trial that went through these, field agents, and they all said, yeah, this was garbage. It was absolute garbage from the start. Like
Oh
I never
yeah,
for a
right.
moment thought this was valid evidence, like was anything
Yeah.
worth looking at. They all
But
said
then
that.
6 months later, Comey picked it up and launched an investigation with it.
Well, I don't know if it was with that. What Comey 6 months later, yeah, that was all kind of what Comey was doing 6 months later was kind of like he kind of combined all of the little things like the Alpha Bank, which is what this trial is really about, and then the Operation Crossfire Hurricane, which was
Steele
Carter
investigation.
Page and Papandopoulos. That was Operation Crossfire Hurricane. That's the one that Peter Strzok started. So Peter Strzok started Operation Crossfire Hurricane, and that's how they ended up tapping the phone lines of the Trump campaign through Operation.
Yep, and
So he took
getting the FISA warrant from
the
Peter
FISA
Strzok
warrant.
by
That
falsifying documents that we know
that
now.
was Klein Smith that falsified the email. So later on, Comey takes all of this and a couple other things, like some other things out of the Steele dossier, and he takes it all under the umbrella and starts basically that was the genesis of the Mueller investigation, that lasted for 2 years after that. So they had all of these fake, investigations, and then it became basically the Mueller investigation. So it's interesting stuff just how they managed to do all this.
And they
But
ended up going for broke because a lot of these agents, they thought for sure that it was in the bag that Hillary was going to win, huh? And then they would be
yeah,
absolved, and this would
and
be brushed under the rug.
and something that came up in the trial that was funny. I think it was reported on before, but it comes up in the trial is that after Trump was elected, right? Then all of the FBI agents involved, they said all of a sudden they said, no, he did say, Sussman did say he was coming on behalf of a client, right? So they all started writing these notes 6 months after the fact, saying that
Huh.
on this and this date, this happened, and he came on behalf of a client. So they all like changed their story after Trump was
Oh,
elected.
yeah.
Except James Baker didn't. James Baker, no, he did. See, what happened was James Baker had, after Trump was elected, I think James Baker was sweating a little bit. So then he calls a briefing and he says, he's talking about the Trump thing. And he made it a point to tell everybody, yeah, Sussman came to me and he said he came on behalf of a client. That's what he said. And that was like him trying to cover his ass. So then all these other FBI agents who were at the briefing, they wrote, came on behalf of a client, came on behalf of a client. So it was like basically to memorialize, he called them all in to memorialize that in fact Sussman had come on behalf of a client because he felt that's what he had to do. I'm not exactly sure why off the top of my head, but he felt that at that point it was time to change the story. And then you get to the testimony of a lot of these guys. They had Mark Elias. They called in Mark Elias, the Clinton lawyer, the main Clinton lawyer. Did you know about that? Oh, he didn't remember anything. He couldn't remember a goddamn. He's like, I don't remember. And he would be like, I don't remember. Why don't you ask Sussman? Right? Why don't you ask Sussman that? So he said that in the trial. And he knew that he wasn't supposed to say that because Sussman is the guy being, charged. And you can't, he was probably going to invoke the Fifth Amendment, and everybody knew it. So you can't say that to the jury. So that almost caused a mistrial right there because Mark Elias kept saying, why don't you ask Sussman that? And you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to imply guilt by saying,
somebody that's going to plead the fifth.
You're not supposed to like in any way imply that he's guilty for not testifying. So, there was that. It's just, I don't know. It's an interesting trial. I think it's probably going to be the last major prosecution on the part of Durham. I think that the Republicans, if they were to take over in a couple years and get the executive and get everything, I don't know how much willingness there's going to be to go back into this. I think that a lot of Republicans are going to want to leave it alone because they don't want to get too deep into the institutional malfeasance of the FBI and the CIA and all that. CIA.
Yeah, that's the way to.
Yeah. There's too many Ted Cruzes and those types of people. They're not gonna want to get much into it. So.
The establishment heads.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, I hear that high-pitched husky cry outside. I've got to let him in.
Okay. I'll pause it.
Okay.
Okay, so you got we're recording again. So you got the dog situated, so hopefully the dog will be okay. So, other than that, there's not much I have to say about the Sussman trial. I don't know if you have anything to add. You probably you haven't been keeping really track of the Sussman trial, right? That's what you were saying earlier.
A little bit, like I was mentioning about reining in some of these intelligence agencies and big networks and everything with the FBI, federal agencies. So it just seems like they have way too much power. They're running their own operations, so they're able to. I don't know.
It's exactly. Well, I do know. It's exactly.
I'm still calibrating.
It's exactly what happened to third century Rome. Is the bureaucracies got too powerful, and really, it's almost a mirror image. They started debasing the currency in the Roman Empire in order to help pay for the massive bureaucracy and the huge government that they had. It's almost a mirror image of what we have here. And
the printing and hyperinflating, you're saying?
They did it differently. In the Roman Empire, they used coins made out of silver. But over time, the Roman government and the people that they used to mint the coins were ordered to use less and less silver, all right? And so they basically, it's basically the same thing as printing money. So instead of using 90% silver in the coins, they would start using 80% silver and mixing the rest with like something cheap, like, tin or something like that. And then it was less and less over time. And the reason they did that was so that the government could save the silver and make more coins. And they'll say, hey, this coin is still worth the same it was worth before, even though it has less. Yeah, it's still the same value. The government said it's still the same value, even though it has less silver in it. So that was their way of basically doing quantitative easing, or that was their way of monetizing the debt, monetizing the government. They didn't really go into debt. There was really not much, government debt. I'm sure there was some, but it was about debasing the currency. So towards the end of the Roman Empire, there was barely any silver in the currency at all. Okay, so it was worthless. But they did it all so that they could save the silver, so that they can give it they could pay the civil servants, and eventually the civil servants, the bureaucrats, said we don't want that currency anymore for payment. We want gold instead of silver. So just give us gold. We don't want that currency at all
It
anymore.
became
So
so powerful.
that's what the bureaucrats said eventually. But see, this goes to this thing that a lot of people don't understand is that look at the Roman Empire. Not even the emperor himself, whether it was Diocletian or whoever, had the ability to say
Stand up to
no, to stand up to the bureaucrats. Okay, that's because the bureaucrats run, and eventually there was a couple Roman emperors. I know there was one in the third century. I forget his name. I had looked it up. I had a article I was reading the other day, like a history article. He was actually a bureaucrat who usurped power and became emperor. So you actually had bureaucrats that became emperors, you know? So
they climb up in the ranks.
and so people don't realize that that can happen. They don't think about that, but that's exactly what's happening in the United States. You know, it's exactly what's happening, and so there's no reining it in. There's not going to be because these are people who would rather the rest of the country crumble around them as long as their little DC bubble stays nice. Really, that's what their mindset is. And they may be nice people in person. They may be good people. They may be Christians or whatever, but at the end of the day, they're going to rationalize to themselves, oh, I don't want to be a whistleblower because I'll lose my job. That's what happened in the FBI. That's what Herbert Hoover did, is he made it so that anybody who, you know, was dissenting in the FBI, they got treated like shit, reassigned to shitty assignments. So that's how Hoover kind of did it. And that culture persists not only in the FBI but in all the agencies, you know. So that's how they handle it. And that's why they can run amok like they do, which is what they're doing right now. They're running amok. But yeah, I mean, I can go on and on about this. What's happening, and it's the same thing that's happened. It happened in China several times over its history. Several times, you had massive bureaucracies grow, and then they just gradually caused the empire or the kingdom to fall apart because they became so parasitic and so destructive to the empire, you know, or to the dynasty. So, anyway, as far as reining them in, I don't know. It'll take a miracle. I mean, it's nothing is impossible, but I think the only answer is decentralization. The only answer is letting the government destroy itself, and then the states can reassert their own control, and then we can pick up the pieces of what's left of the federal government after that. But the states have to reassert control, their own control of their own jurisdictions, and start saying, fuck you. Like, stop taking federal money, for example. Stop taking educational money.
Yeah.
That's how they control the schools. Stop taking all this money and saying, we don't want the money. We'll handle it ourselves, you know. And then that's how you really... What's that?
Bring back ties to the communities, whether it's, you know, teachers unions or metro police unions, like people that are not really accountable to the communities, people that are more worried about liability, that don't really have an interest to protect our kids. I think people are waking up to this.
Yeah, which is a great segue into Uvalde. And what's your take on Uvalde? Tell me what you think about Uvalde, the shooting in Texas, or even the shooting in Buffalo.
Going on with this. It scares me how the more that I look into this, there's a lot of shenanigans. But this is true? The cops, the Uvalde police force, right? They waited for 45 minutes to 90 minutes to an hour and a half while they were outside of the hallway because there was an active shooter. That not only did they not respond, you know, by some stand down order, but they had restricted parents, you know, parents of the children. I don't know how they managed that from going inside. Like, I just started looking at some of the cell phone footage of the police arresting the parents. So that's like the culture that we're creating. I mean, are the cops more scared about liability? Do they think they're going to get sued or blamed for something where they feel it's in their best interest to be cowards and do nothing and try to wait for something else to have their hands tied with chain of command or waiting on orders. It's
Yeah.
reprehensible.
It's a general breakdown in our civil society. I think it's like, yeah, you're right. They were scared, I'm sure, because they thought it was a hostage situation. So they
But
figured
where are they going to be accountable? If I mean, if they're going to investigate themselves, this is a bureaucratic
they won't
problem.
be.
Like sheriffs, if there were local
Exactly.
elections, sheriffs and somebody that would be more accountable, somebody with ties to the community. I think that should be a lot of the conversation that we're having. I mean,
It is a bureaucratic problem, and that's why it won't be handled. It won't be taken care of. President Biden just went there. He didn't mention the police and their mistakes, you know,
he saw it
and
as an opportunity to campaign and to
gun
push
control.
divisiveness, gun control, yeah, the agenda, to campaign, blame the Republicans, blame a political opponent. It's just there's no words for this really how out of touch these people are and arrogant because they just think that they can orchestrate. I don't want to say orchestrate how they think they can, you know, push people around and manipulate narrative and just create this influence that there's just going to be a wave of support for them or a wave of indignation against their opponents. Like they don't show empathy. Can they even feign empathy? Like it's
No,
it's
these
pretty
people
scary.
are beyond. They're beyond, empathy. I think.
Yeah.
You know, I my take on it has started to be this is that look at it this way: if this was like the 1970s or 60s, and someone would have noticed that kid and what he's going through and what his particular struggles are, some member of the community would have seen this kid and tried to be an active tried to actively get in this kid's life and intervene,
Yeah.
and that is one of the big things we're missing right now. I think we've gotten to the point where everybody just thinks the government's going to come in and take care of everything. And so we've lost this community spirit, this spirit of mutual aid that Peter Kropotkin talked about, which is my favorite anarchist. A lot of people say he was a communist. He was only a communist for a short time, and then he kind of said, I don't like
Yeah.
communism anymore. But he said he was an ecologist, and he said the human species, like a lot of animal species, he noticed when he went on his travels as an ecologist in Russia back in the 1800s, he would study animals and animal behavior. And he said, there are species of birds and other species all throughout the animal kingdom that will take care of their sick and they will take care of their elderly. It's not just a human thing, it's an instinctual thing. They will take care of their communities. And what's happening, and he argued this in a lot of his, in a lot of his writings, is that all of this focus on creating government bureaucracies and government structures, it kind of takes away that instinctual need among people to actually be active members of a community. And so
Oh, for sure.
they start to distance themselves and they start to become distant from
Lean on
their
authority.
yeah, they lean on the authority and they stop, caring about members of their community. And I think that's where we're at. I mean, most people tell me, they don't know their neighbors, they never talk to their neighbors, like nobody cares about each other anymore. And I think that is a big part of the problem. I think that
Cultural issues.
it is a
People
cultural issue.
like Tim Pool says, trying to come up with policy issues for something as a solution when we have cultural problems, cultural
Right.
decay, and not
Right.
giving a shit about each other.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that that's a big part of what's the problem, because that's even a small town, and you would think in a small town you would still have some semblance of that community spirit, but apparently not. I mean, I remember when I was a kid in the '80s and '90s, everybody and this is in the military when people were moving a lot, and everybody on the street knew each other and knew each other's kids, and people noticed my situation and tried to intervene and tried to be a positive impact on my life. And people tried to my parents got involved in another neighbor's kids because they had a fucked up family, so I guess they wanted to virtue signal and they got in there and said, oh, this is crazy. and they help the kids. So you don't see that anymore. And I think that in the old days, someone would have seen this, what's going on, and been like, oh, God, we got to help this kid out or he's going to wig out and fucking kill a bunch of people. That's what I would think, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
But nobody does that
I was
anymore.
never a believer that it takes a village to raise a kid, but
It
to an
does.
extent, you gotta have community ties. You gotta know the kids that your child is hanging out with. Talk to them, get to know them. Like in the age where everybody says, we're so inclusive and
Well,
empathetic towards everybody, it just seems like
it's the
they're really
opposite.
not. They don't take the time. They'll judge a book by its cover, make assumptions because they don't want to dive deep into anything. They don't want to really get to know somebody. Culturally, they'll look to try to see, I guess where they can kind of make assumptions from,
Mm-hmm.
and just think they have a handle on everything. But
Mm-hmm.
they're missing the communication. It's like I
Mm-hmm.
feel bad for my
Communication.
daughter because so many kids will flake. She'll have plans, and then half the
Mm-hmm.
kids, give or take, are always gonna flake.
Mm-hmm.
The other half can't get a ride, so I have to like do the rounds. And thank God, right now she's at the beach with a couple kids that one of them rode their bike there, one walked to get there, and then
Mm-hmm.
two of the girls got rides. But it's like, oh, thank God they have like a
Mm-hmm.
connection of a couple kids that can actually like
Mm-hmm.
be kids and get around. I mean,
You
they're
know,
high
but
school age and everything.
think about it. Even in the area you are at, and I'm not gonna, out what area you're at, but even the area you're at, which is a densely urban area, it's an old neighborhood, big neighborhood. I bet you if you would go back in time to the 1980s, there would be
I
much
was thinking
more.
about that.
Yeah, you would have much more people on the street that would be active in each other's lives, that would get to know each other. People on the street would know each other. And nowadays on
Yeah,
that
Hollywood
street, I
is laid
bet.
out like that. Totally.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah, it's
very
a,
active. There's the downtown area, there's a beach, and it's all, you know, one park next to another. It's catered towards outdoor life or,
yeah,
not
and
just tourists, but they look out for the
but
community.
but
There's so
now
much to do.
yeah, but nowadays people don't really get involved in each other's lives or even try to get to know each other. It's the same thing in my neighborhood. A lot of our neighborhood's actually kind of atypical because people do talk to each other. But yeah, a lot of neighborhoods people don't they don't care about each other. So that's a big problem. I think that's a bigger problem than I think any other problem. It's just not a problem. The only way to there is a way to solve that problem, in my opinion, an easy way, and that is less government. Get people
Yeah,
to start
exactly.
being more
Get people more
self-reliant.
civic minded, yeah, self-reliant.
Yeah, just take all of these government bureaucracies out of the picture, and guess what? People start helping each other out. It's natural. It's a human instinct. It's not like, this is something that it would relatively quickly. It's like whenever there was a hurricane up here, and then, all of a
People
sudden
come together.
everybody's coming out helping each other, and it's like so natural. It's so
Right?
natural.
And the bureaucracies are a letdown. Government's always going to advocate for more government
Yep.
and make excuses for their shortcomings and their failures with, the solutions of more government. But we got to stop glorifying people, like glorifying police,
Glorifying what?
metro
Glorifying
metro
police.
police,
Hmm.
like that are going to stand outside while kids are being murdered because they
Hmm.
don't want to assume liability or
Hmm.
put themselves in harm's way, but
Same
act
thing
like they
happened.
represent a community they probably
Mhm.
don't even live in.
And
And the
what?
same thing with teachers, glorifying teachers that a lot of them didn't even want to go back to work. They wanted to negotiate terms to come back, salary increases. And while these kids that are home, distance learning, they're going through all kinds of psychological issues. And it's just like, it seems like a lot of teachers didn't care. They would
Right.
blame the parents and just any excuse to prolong this. I don't want to make assumptions on
Well,
all teachers, but it's just going to be more administrative state advocating for more government
always,
solutions to respond to this.
always, and they never, and it's always a disappointment. If you rely on government, you're gonna get disappointed every time. And it's like, you brought up something. You jogged my memory on something. Another thing is the lockdowns. How did the lockdowns affect this kid? You know, think about what the impact of the lockdowns were on this kid. Would this mass shooting have occurred but for the lockdowns that happened and all of the other stupid shit that the government and the pharmaceutical companies put us through over the last couple years. So it's all, yeah, it's just,
That's basically another government institution there. I mean, they have
yeah,
regulatory capture of the agency of the FDA,
yeah,
and a lot of times clinicians, people, more administrators, their solution is to just, medicate a kid, and
yeah.
that's what they want to do. That's
It's
the extent of how they want to handle the mental health debate. Like give those institutions more power. The pharmaceutical
it's
industries.
it's
They work together.
fascism. It's fascism. It's public-private partnerships. It's a merger of corporation and state. The healthcare industry and the government have merged, and
And yeah, and
pharmaceutical
I don't know
companies
if
are part of that.
inadvertently they're gonna. I don't know if inadvertently they want to break down the family as an institution, but that's the threat. At a certain point, that becomes a threat to
How you
these
gotta
bureaucracies.
you gotta look at how fascism, how it developed. How it developed was they said, people like Mussolini said, oh, we're not going to outright seize companies and seize property. We don't do that as fascists. But what we are going to do is regulate every fucking aspect of the business, and therefore they're going to be de facto, part of the government at that point.
Right.
And
Where they
that's
have
what
to play ball with the government.
have to. If you're
Bypass
if,
the regulations and take out their competition. So it's
yeah.
like there's that relationship. It goes both ways.
You got to look at it this way. How did they do the CHS mandates for the vaccines? How they did it was they said, oh, okay, if you're a hospital and you don't force your workers to get vaccinated, then we're not going to give you, this government money. And they depend on that government money to the point where they couldn't refuse it. So it's basically using printed money, which is unsustainable. That's not going to last forever.
Deficit spending
But
on that.
yeah, they're going to use deficit spending. The money is the big thing. I think that once once the fiscal situation finally resolves itself, in other words, the government's going to have to stop spending beyond its means. Once that happens, that's going to take care of a lot of these government overreach issues, because how they do it is by using money as a bait and switch type of thing, So
Right.
same thing.
There's actually another case going on too. Brooke Jackson, right, the whistleblower within Pfizer, the Pfizer Corporation, where she was saying that Pfizer had solicited not donations, but taxpayer money by falsifying claims.
Right.
So
Let me pause it.
That's one of Robert Barnes'
Hold that thought for a second. Let me pause it real
Okay.
quick. So go ahead. We're recording again. I don't know anything about. Tell me more. It rings a bell. What is this about?
Yeah, that was the extent of what I knew. There's a whistleblower within Pfizer, and there's trials going on right now currently.
Oh, was that the Robert Barnes case?
Yeah, Robert Barnes is representing her.
Yeah, I have to look into that. He was talking about it the other day.
Right, I don't know much more about that. I was hoping that you did, but apparently
No.
Pfizer had falsified some type of clinical studies, which, that they were hosting these studies on their own. They were handpicking,
And the FDA was,
I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, and the FDA was going right along with it, right? They were literally rubber stamping it, right?
This is what Evelyn was telling me about a while ago. There was somebody within the FDA. Somebody had reported this. No, I think maybe it was Brooke Jackson that reported this to the FDA or something, or no. No, the one that fired. Somebody was fired for bringing this up. Somebody in one of the pharmaceutical companies. I digress, but that was another story. They reported something to the FDA, and then they got fired, and they were pressured or something to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I don't want to speculate too much, but
No,
that's never really been my area of expertise. But I was hoping you knew a little bit.
No, there was a lot. Yeah, there
big.
was a lot of shit like that going on, but I think we've gone an hour at this point, so I think we should wrap it up. But I think we covered some ground there.
But this was to the tune of billions of dollars, so that's why it's like a really big deal. And also,
what was to the tune of billion?
The money, the taxpayer money that Pfizer got.
Billions.
So
how about
they
hundreds?
Hundreds of billions. But
Hundreds
for
of
this
billions.
particular round of funding. I
Yeah.
guess they had to be first market in some aspects or
Well,
whatever.
Trump handed Moderna $50 billion right at the beginning. Moderna was about to go out of business, and Trump hands them $50 billion at the beginning of Operation Warp Speed. And then, yeah, these companies collectively, just the United States ones, they've had to have gotten hundred. I don't know. I'd have to look at their balance sheets and see what kind of revenue they're claiming. Last I heard, it was in the less than 100 billion for Pfizer, but it was significant, like 50 billion just from vaccine revenue,
And that's a
alone.
good example of, you know, the bureaucrat, the highest paid bureaucrat in the U.S. in the world, Fauci, more powerful than a politician, than an elected president in this
Yeah,
case, because imagine if Trump didn't do anything at that point or take COVID seriously, they would have removed him from office so quickly. Like
yeah,
they kind of compelled him to use this leverage. If they don't,
yeah.
I don't know. It's way more complicated than people want to believe,
Well,
but
look how much of a
they
rat
could rein in
Fauci.
these.
Go ahead.
And no, I mean these things. People, he openly lied to Congress.
Yeah,
About not being involved with Health Alliance and Peter Daszak.
right.
Their gain of function research. It's it's on record now that we were funding the Wuhan labs, this type
Yeah,
of research and stuff. And
and not just the
I don't
Wuhan
know.
labs. We're funding labs all over the fucking world. All over the
Yeah. So
world,
when I
biolabs.
mean, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, and all the ones we talked about this in Ukraine with Victoria
Yeah,
Nuland and the Metabiota link,
everywhere.
Hunter Biden, like. So when people have conspiracy theories, like I don't gaslight anybody. I would never laugh at someone because of the psychological abuse that happened the last couple of years. How they say conspiracy theorists are, they want to shut down their opinions, ban what they have to say, and then months later it comes out they were absolutely right the whole time. So not in
Yeah,
every case, but there's the FBI. It's like the J. Edgar Hoover version of the FBI right now. They're running all these domestic operations. They
yeah.
have former FBI agents that are involved in like a Buffalo mass shooting. Some things are suspect. They need to be
I
investigated. Or there's like
what
a
what's
fake
with the
kidnapping attempt
what happened with the Buffalo shooting?
I guess there's a former FBI agent that is in question as a suspect, as I can't even think of the term. What do you call that when somebody is an accomplice? Like he may have been an accomplice because he was in contact with this kid on Discord chats, and they had been
Oh, I heard
investigating him
about
for a
that.
while. So, but pretty
Former.
much what I'm saying is that the FBI, if they have the opportunity to interfere, then maybe they would find the opportunity first to not intervene, but to corroborate with somebody and to lead them to do something, which we have to be careful. We've gone an hour and a half, and I don't want to say anything that will get this video taken down. I made a
Well,
whole video about.
I'm trying to look it up. Look something up. Look that up.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. You're gonna bring that up.
Bing isn't available right now. Okay, well, it says Bing is. I typed that in, and it says Bing isn't
But
available.
let me go on a little rant with that for a minute though, while you're looking up
Yeah,
that
yeah,
page.
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, because whether it's like an FBI plot to kidnap the Governor Whitmer, where it comes out that almost half of the co-conspirators were FBI agents that pretty much pushed along the whole plot, they have the opportunity to interfere in something, and it's seeming like to push some type of agenda or some operation that they're running. I mean, MK Ultra was a real, that's part of U.S. history. That was a real project. So we have to consider it's as diabolical as this can be. Like,
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
and right now, like, you can't really talk about this. Isn't that a coincidence with
Say.
mass casualty events? You're not allowed to say anything on social media questioning official narratives
Well,
surrounding mass casualty events
I'm gonna put this on
after
the
Alex
screen.
Jones, Sandy Hook. Okay,
I'm.
yeah, go ahead.
I got a New York Post article. I think that's good enough. You said I can't. You can't screen. You can't get screen share. Why can't you get screen
No,
share
just
this
describe
time?
it though. That's okay.
Okay.
I'll see it when I watch the video again.
Okay. So it says feds probing if retired. This is New York Post. This is May 27th, 2022. Feds probing if retired agent had advance notice about suspected Buffalo shooters' plans, according to a report. So two law enforcement officials with knowledge of the probe told the Buffalo News that the feds believe the former agent, believed to be from Texas, was among at least 6 people who regularly communicated with the alleged gunman online about his racist views. So there is, that's not a conspiracy theory. That actually is the case, that there was
Right.
that there's some former agent, supposedly former agent, allegedly says it was talking to the guy a lot, or at least who knows what that means. I mean, maybe he was just on the
Exactly.
same, maybe he was just on the same chat threads or something
Discord,
and
right?
said stuff to him. But yeah, that is
But like
crazy.
I was
So
saying, it leaves room for wild speculation, and I can't condemn anybody for coming up with conspiracy theories right now because, it's like a mass public, like a psychological manipulation to try to convince people, like, haha, oh, if you have these thoughts, then you're a conspiracy theorist, and shame on you. How could you dare question these lives that were lost? What are you, like, another racist? Also,
right.
like, the million ways they can gaslight you, but they run these type of operations.
Well,
There's, like
of
we saw with
course,
Ray Epps and J6, and with the Whitmer kidnapping
Whitmer
case, and
kidnapping case is a
even in
proven.
Uvalde. Yeah, in Uvalde in 2018, I don't know if you've heard about this. You can bring this up. There was another plot in 2018, a
I
similar
heard about
school
that.
shooting scenario where they were watching somebody there. I mean, how many people does it
Yeah,
take for a conspiracy in a town to have certain officials complicit in something, blackmailed or a part of something, and then, not to speculate further, but then the intelligence community is like, okay, we have our people in Uvalde. Okay, we're going to run with this. We're going to, carry out this drill, and it's going to go live. We're going to push this exercise here. We're going to run this protocol. I don't know, like as interference or to push something, or it's just I don't want to speculate, but now on top of it, like I was saying about the mass casualty events that you're not allowed to question on social
well,
media, do you think this? Here's a little
look.
theory. Maybe
Mhm.
wait, because
Go ahead.
I want to get this out. I had a hard
Go.
time
Go
spitting it
for it.
out. Maybe one of my theories is that before the midterms here, maybe people that start speaking out because there's such wild, there's like shenanigans, a lot of stuff going on surrounding Uvalde, things that were very questionable, statements that were retracted and changed, stories that changed, things that don't add up. So when people start questioning this mass casualty event, they're going to be banned and deplatformed and have their, I know to what extent of this is, you become a dissident. You were taken away from the conversation when you question something. So I think that might be the next protocol. You start having parents that make questions and say this is a bunch of bullshit, this is a cover up, and
Mm.
then bam, you're taken out of the conversation before midterms, before an election or something. Maybe
I
that
mean,
might be
they're going
part
to
of that.
use any. Of course, if it's someone that they want to ban, and they're going to use that opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, they're going to take that
Now what about?
opportunity. We see who's the lead, in-house counsel of Twitter is James Baker.
Baker, right?
So
Because
it's
that's
how
what I'm saying.
stupid.
This is an
How
operation.
Yeah, it's like, and no one heard about that. I didn't even know that until
That's what
Elon
they got
Musk.
Alex Jones with. That's what Alex got banned for, was
Mhm.
questioning Sandy Hook and saying that it
Right,
was a false flag, that it was staged,
right.
and he was sued. I'm glad it didn't stick. The lawsuits from the parents right now, I don't think they pushed any more punitive
Nah,
damages or any consequences. But imagine if parents speak out, or anybody, not just parents, but anybody speak out on some mass casualty event, and
yeah.
they're not only taken off of Twitter or Facebook,
No,
but
they're gonna.
they're fined. They have their bank accounts frozen if they
Yeah,
don't pay a
yeah.
fine or something. Like
Well, that's what they
that's
want
the
to be able to
territory. This
do.
is where this is headed. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's what they want to be able to do is freeze people's bank accounts for dissent. Of course,
Yeah.
that's like kind of why they want to go for the central bank digital currency, because then they can
Mm-hmm.
control whether you can spend money or not, whether you can even use money, whether you get it or use it.
Right.
So, well, yeah, I see that there was. I remember now. You jogged my memory. There was a plot in 2018, not related to this kid though. It was a different, I believe, a different. There was conflicting information on whether one of the suspects. So anyway, let's see. It says right here. This is Daily Wire, and and this was 27th. And it says there was conflicting evidence if that was the same kid.
Yeah.
The teens,
No, not
13
even
and
about
14.
it being the same kid.
They, the school, blah blah. Both team, blah blah. Yeah, it says
There could have been grooming or something going on. I mean, not to just put it lightly like that, but to an extent, that the circumstances could have been just perfect. They could have had the right authority figures in place who are complicit on something like this that could initiate these stand down orders or something.
Oh, I had one thing to say is it's not beyond the realm of possibility of the government killing its own citizens for some, political scheme, because look what they do overseas. They kill thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people. They're doing it right now in Ukraine, and it's just straight murder, and they know it, and they don't care. So if they can do it over there, the only reason if they can do it over there, they're doing it because they can get away with it. If they could get away with it here, which they do, they kill people. The government kills people all the time. Let's just be honest. Gary Webb, was one that I think they killed. I don't know how you shoot yourself in the head twice. I mean, apparently, I don't know how that's possible, but they have killed people before, assassinated people before in the United States. I'm convinced of that. I don't know that for a fact, but look at what they do overseas, and that's your answer right there. Of course they would, do some shenanigans to get a change in the narrative. Oh, just to change the narrative from Ukraine or from the economy to something else. They would sacrifice children.
Clamp down on civil liberties.
They would sacrifice children for it. They would literally, they would literally allow something to happen if they thought it would be advantageous to them.
Goosebumps. It makes me shake thinking about it.
They would do it because look what they do overseas. They do it. They kill people with impunity. They don't care. These people are psychopaths. So we're at about an hour and 20 minutes now. So let's call it quits there, and I'll upload this right away. But it was a good talk. It was a good one.
Yes, right on.
All right. So I'm going to stop recording right now.